I never thought the hands that once reached out to me for candy would be the same ones to strike my face. And what broke me even more was not the slap itself, but the laughter that followed. Before I continue, please, if you've ever loved someone who forgot your worth, stay till the end of this story. It's not just about pain. It's about rediscovering your own light when the people you raised leave you in the dark. And if my words touch your heart, please like, subscribe, and share this story. Because sometimes, just being heard can heal what's been broken for years. I still remember that afternoon vividly, the smell of lentils simmering on the stove, the slow ticking of the old clock on the wall, the echo of a child's laughter bouncing off the marble floor. It was my grandson, Arham, 4 years old, my sweet little boy, or at least he used to be. He was the reason I used to smile again after losing my husband. You see, I wasn't always this quiet woman sitting alone in a one-bedroom flat. I used to be the heart of a home, the kind of mother who spent her days cooking, cleaning, and saving every extra rupee for her children's dreams. My son Rehan, he was my pride, my only child. After his father passed away, I poured everything I had into him. Every late-night fever, every missed meal, every sleepless prayer, all for him. When he got married, I told myself, "You've done your job well, Sophia. Now you can rest." But rest never came, because from the moment his wife, Eamon, stepped into the house, everything started changing. At first she was polite, quiet even, but her silence had a sharpness to it, a kind of cold that seeps in slowly until you realize you're freezing. She rearranged the furniture without asking. She moved my tea set, my husband's last gift, into the storage room because, as she said, it doesn't match the new decor. And when I made her tea in the mornings, she'd thank me. But never look me in the eyes. Rehan didn't notice. Or maybe he chose not to. He was busy. Work, friends, the new life he was building outside those walls. He didn't see how I ate alone most nights, or how I started locking my door before bed. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Still, I held on. Because that's what mothers do. We tell ourselves that silence keeps the peace, even when it's slowly killing us. But peace isn't built on silence, it's built on love. And love was leaving that house day by day. Then came the day I made my biggest mistake. I spoke up. Iman had been on her phone all morning, scrolling through pictures, laughing softly. Lunch was late. Arham was hungry. So I went to the kitchen, rolled up my sleeves, and started cooking. When she finally walked in, I smiled and said gently, "Beta, I've made biryani, Rehan's favorite. He'll be home soon, and I thought we could all eat together." She didn't smile back. She just sighed and said, "You don't have to do everything, Amma. It makes me look lazy." I didn't mean to offend her. I just wanted to help. But by evening, when Rehan came home, she told him I had scolded her, that I made her feel small in her own house. Rehan looked at me with eyes that used to hold trust. "Ami, please. Just let her handle things her way, her way. Her way meant I was no longer needed. Her way meant I was a guest in my own home. After that, I stopped cooking. Stopped talking much, too. My world became smaller, from 3 rooms to 1. I'd spend my days sitting near the window, knitting small sweaters for Aram. He still smiled at me then, still ran to me with open arms when I called his name. He was my piece of heaven in a house that felt like hell, until that afternoon. It was a Sunday. Rehan and Eamon were sitting in the lounge, sipping coffee and scrolling through their phones. Arham was running around, playing with a toy car. I had just finished folding the laundry and brought it into the living room. I smiled at him, called softly, "Aram, come here, Beta. Daddy got you some toffees." He turned, eyes bright. But before he came, Eamon said sharply, "Arham, don't take too many. Daddy will make you fat," her tone stung. But I stayed quiet. When Arham ran over, I bent down and kissed his cheek. He laughed, reached for the candy, and then suddenly his small hand swung across my face, a hard, unexpected slap. For a moment I froze. The room went silent except for the faint hum of the AC. My cheek burned, not from the pain, but from the sound of my son's laughter breaking the silence. He chuckled and said, "Relax, Ami, He's only playing, and then Ayman, without even looking up from her phone, sneered, "Go! Amma, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Go." Just that one word, and everything inside me cracked. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just stood there, holding the folded clothes that suddenly felt heavier than all the years I'd lived. I turned, walked back to my room, and closed the door. That night, I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at my reflection in the small cracked mirror. There was a red mark on my cheek, fading slowly, but what hurt most wasn't visible. It was the thought that I had raised a man who could laugh while his own mother was humiliated. I kept replaying his voice in my head. He's only playing. Maybe it started as play for them too. Ayman's subtle taunts, Rayhan's silence, my slow erasure from their life. It was all a game, and I was the piece they didn't want on their board anymore. The next morning, I made my decision. While they slept, I packed my clothes in a small bag, wrapped my husband's photo in a scarf, and took one last look at the house I had built with my hands. Every corner held a memory. Every wall, a whisper of laughter that once belonged to us. I placed a note on the kitchen counter. "Thank you for everything. I won't trouble you anymore." Then I stepped out. It wasn't dramatic. No one stopped me. No one even knew I had gone. The street was quiet, the morning air cool against my face. For the first time in years, I breathed freely. But freedom comes with loneliness too. I didn't have much, just the pension money my husband left behind. So I found a small room to rent, a single bed, a small window, and a kettle for tea. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and when I made my first cup of tea there alone, I realized silence can hurt, but it can also heal. At night, I missed Arham's laughter. But I knew I couldn't go back. Not until I remembered who I was before I became their servant in the name of love. That was the day I decided. They may have taken my home, my dignity, even my son's affection. But they wouldn't take my peace. Because this time, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away to start over. The first few days in that little room were quiet. Painfully quiet. When you've spent your whole life surrounded by voices, the clinking of cups, the hum of the fan, the occasional laughter echoing down the hallway. Silence doesn't feel peaceful at first. It feels like punishment. I remember waking up that first morning to the sound of the azan outside, the faint aroma of parathas drifting from a neighbor's window. For a moment, I thought I was home again. Then I looked around. The peeling paint, the single window, the kettle on the small table, and reality settled in. I wasn't Rihan's mother anymore. Not in the way I used to be. I was just Sophia, a woman learning how to exist again. At first I kept expecting the phone to ring. Maybe Rihan would notice. Maybe he'd call and say, "Ami, where are you?" But days turned into weeks, and nothing. The world moved on, and so did they. But something strange began to happen in that silence. I began to hear myself again. I started going for morning walks. There was a park nearby, small, overgrown, but alive. Children played there. Elders sat on benches talking about the old days. One of them, an older lady named Shireen, noticed me sitting alone one morning. She smiled, then said, "You look like someone who's forgotten how to smile." I laughed softly. Maybe I have. She didn't ask questions that day, but she sat with me anyway. We shared our tea, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible. Soon, she introduced me to a small group of women. All widows, all living alone, all with stories like mine. One had been left by her children. Another had lost hers too soon. They didn't pity me. They understood me. And in their company, my silence began to loosen. Every Thursday, we'd cook together and feed the children from the nearby orphanage. They'd run up, calling us Ami and Dadi, their laughter filling the air with something I hadn't felt in years. Warmth. It's funny. Sometimes the love we lose in one home finds us in another. One evening, after we finished serving food, a little girl tugged at my dupatta. Her name was Aisha, 6 years old, eyes too wise for her age. She handed me a handmade bracelet, pink thread with small plastic beads, and said, "Daddy, this is for you. You always smile at me when you serve roti." That tiny bracelet, it broke something open inside me, because it reminded me that kindness never goes unnoticed, even when your own family forgets it. That night, I sat by my window and whispered a quiet prayer. Maybe this is what you wanted for me, Allah. Maybe this peace was waiting all along. Still, sometimes, my heart would ache. I'd wonder if Aram remembered me, if he ever asked where Dottie went. Then, one afternoon, about 3 months later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. It was Rehan. He looked different. Not older, just tired, like life had finally caught up to him. He held a box of sweets in his hand. "Ami," he said softly, "I was just passing by. Thought I'd check in. Passing by." Those 2 words pierced deeper than any insult could. I invited him in anyway. He sat awkwardly, looking around my small room. "You shouldn't be living like this," he muttered. "You could have stayed with us." I smiled faintly. "Could I?" He looked down, didn't answer. Then, as if remembering his reason for coming, he said, "Aram asks about you sometimes. He doesn't understand why you left." I wanted to believe that, but the tone in his voice, distant, hesitant, made me wonder if he was just trying to ease his guilt. Still, I nodded and said, "Tell him Dottie loves him very much." There was a pause. Then Rehan looked up, his eyes glossy for the first time in years. "Ami, I know things weren't perfect. Ayman, she just has her ways. But you could come back now." She said it's fine. Fine. That word again, like I was some burden to be tolerated. I took a deep breath and said quietly, "Rehan, I don't think I belong there anymore. You have your life. Let me have mine." He looked genuinely confused. "But you're my mother." "Yes," I whispered. "I was your mother when you needed me. Now you need peace, and so do I." He didn't understand it then. Maybe he still doesn't. But when he left that day, I didn't cry, because I realized something important. Forgiveness doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes it just means letting go of the version of people you wished they were. Weeks passed. My life found rhythm again. Morning walks, tea with Shireen, laughter with the children. I even started tutoring the older girls at the orphanage, teaching them how to read and write. One day, as I was helping Aisha with her letters, the manager of the orphanage came to me. "Baji," she said, "we're short on staff. Would you be interested in helping part-time? The children love you." I said yes before my fear could stop me. It wasn't much, just a few hours every day. But for the first time in years, I felt needed again. Not because I was someone's mother or wife, but because I was me. I started earning a small amount. Enough to buy little gifts for the children, enough to pay my rent, enough to stand tall again. And slowly, without even realizing it, I began to heal. But life always finds a way to test you, doesn't it? One rainy evening, as I was closing up the classroom, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice came through, shaky, broken. "It was Ayman, Ami," she said, her voice trembling. "Rehan's in the hospital. He had an accident." My heart stopped. The walls around me spun. My knees went weak. In that moment, all the anger, all the distance, it vanished. Because no matter what had happened, he was still my son. I rushed to the hospital in the rain, soaked, breathless, praying with every step. When I reached, Ayman was pacing outside the ICU. Her mascara was smudged, her face pale. She looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in years. "He asked for you," she whispered. I froze. For a moment, I didn't know whether to feel pain or gratitude. When I walked into that room, Rehan was lying there, hooked up to machines, his face pale but alive. He turned his head slowly, and when his eyes met mine, something inside both of us broke. "Ami," he whispered weakly. "I'm sorry." Those 2 words undid everything I'd been holding inside for years. I took his hand, the same hand that once waved me away, and pressed it against my face. "You're my son," I said softly. There's nothing to forgive. Tears slipped from his eyes, and for the first time in forever, he didn't hide them. Ayman stood at the doorway, silent, watching us. I knew then that the universe has its own way of bringing people back to humility, not through punishment, but through perspective. Rehan recovered slowly, and though I visited often, I didn't move back. I had built something of my own now, a life, a purpose, and a kind of quiet strength I never knew I had. He'd come by sometimes, bring groceries, ask if I needed help. And I'd smile and say, "I'm fine, Beta, truly fine." And this time, I meant it. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone to see my worth. I had already found it. It's strange how a house can be filled with laughter, and yet, you can feel utterly alone inside it. After that day, after my grandson's hand struck my face and no one said a word to stop him, something in me quietly died. But something else was born too. Something I had long forgotten. My own voice. For days, I lived like a ghost in my son's home. I cooked, I cleaned, I folded the laundry, and when my knees ached, I still smiled. I told myself it was love, what I was doing, but it wasn't. It was desperation. A desperate attempt to belong where I was no longer wanted. Every night I could hear them laughing in the living room. My daughter-in-law's sharp laughter cut through the walls like glass. My son's deep voice joined hers, and my grandson's giggles, pure, innocent, echoed through the hallway. I would sit on the edge of my bed, knitting something he'd never wear, just to feel needed. But I wasn't. They never asked if I'd eaten. They never asked how my knees were doing. I was just there, an old shadow moving around their perfect lives. One afternoon, I went to make tea. I placed 3 cups on the tray and carried them out with trembling hands. My grandson ran past me, chasing a toy car, and knocked the tray from my hands. The cups shattered. The tea splashed across the floor. Before I could even bend down to clean it, my daughter-in-law shouted, "Can't you see where you're going?" Her words were sharp, humiliating. My son looked up from his phone, sighed, and said, "Mom, you really need to be more careful. We can't keep cleaning up after you. Cleaning up after me." That sentence lingered, like I was the mess they had to deal with, like my presence was dirt beneath their feet. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. My tears didn't feel warm anymore. They were cold, empty. I prayed for strength, not to change them, but to change myself. The next morning, I woke up before everyone. I looked at my hands, wrinkled, trembling, yet still strong. I realized I had spent my entire life serving others, my husband, my children, this house. But no one had ever asked what I wanted. Not once. I packed a small bag, just some clothes, my old photographs, and the few rupees I had saved. As I folded the last sari, my daughter-in-law appeared in the doorway. She looked at me with that same smirk and said, "Going somewhere?" I looked up and smiled faintly. "Yes," I said. "Home," she frowned. "This is your home." I shook my head. "No, my dear. This is your house. My home is wherever I can breathe." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. She turned and called my son. He came rushing, confused, half angry, half embarrassed. "Mom, what are you doing?" he asked. I met his eyes, those same eyes I once adored when he was a little boy, the ones that used to look at me with love. "I'm leaving," I said softly. "Don't worry. I won't trouble you anymore," he scoffed. "You're being dramatic again." Again, as if pain was a habit I chose. I smiled sadly. "Maybe, but at least this time it's for me." I walked past him, my heart heavy, but my steps light. My grandson came running toward me, confused. "Grandma, where are you going?" he asked. I knelt down, touched his cheek gently and whispered, "To find the part of me I lost here." He didn't understand, of course. He just hugged me, the way he used to before his parents filled his mind with whispers. That moment alone made me almost falter. But I didn't. I couldn't. I left their house, clutching my small bag, the cold morning air brushing against my face. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel old. I felt free. I took a bus back to my old village. Every turn of the wheel felt like time rolling backward, taking me to the woman I once was. I arrived at my childhood home, which had long been abandoned. The roof was broken, the walls cracked, but when I stepped inside, it felt warmer than their mansion ever had. For the next few weeks, I lived quietly. I cleaned the little house, planted a few flowers in the yard, and began sewing again. People in the village would stop by, surprised to see me alone. Some offered help, but I refused politely. I wanted to rebuild myself, brick by brick. Slowly, word spread that I was back. Old friends came to visit. One of them, Rahana, ran a small women's center. She asked if I could teach stitching to the widows and young girls who wanted to earn. I hesitated at first. I hadn't taught in years, but something inside me whispered, yes. And so I began again. At first my hands shook. The needle slipped. But soon the rhythm returned, the same rhythm that once fed my family. The girls listened to me with respect, their eyes bright with hope. For the first time in years, someone looked at me like I mattered. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. My small class grew into a workshop. We started selling hand-stitched clothes in the local market. The income wasn't much, but it was ours. Honest, pure, born from hard work and dignity. One day, the local newspaper came to interview me. They wrote an article titled, "The Forgotten Mother Who Built a Home for Others." When I saw that headline, I cried. Not from sadness, but from peace. Because I finally understood. I was never weak. I was just waiting for a chance to remember my strength. A few months later, my son showed up. I saw his car before I saw him. He looked thinner, tired, like life hadn't been kind to him. "Mom," he said, standing in the doorway of the small workshop, his voice uncertain. I turned slowly. "You found me," he nodded. I saw the article. I didn't know you'd done all this." I smiled softly. "There's a lot you didn't know." He lowered his eyes. "The house feels empty without you." "Does it?" I asked gently. He nodded. I'm sorry. For everything. For not protecting you. For letting her." He couldn't finish the sentence. His voice broke. For a long time I said nothing. I just watched him. My heart wanted to forgive him instantly, because that's what mothers do. But a small part of me knew that this silence was my final lesson to him. "Mom, please come back," he said quietly. I took a deep breath. "Son, I can visit. I can see you, but I won't live there again." "Why?" he whispered. "Because I finally found peace, and I can't trade it again for love that hurts." He looked at me with tears in his eyes. I stepped forward, placed my hand on his cheek, and smiled. "You don't have to understand," I said softly. "Just remember, don't let your son grow up learning it's okay to hurt the people who love him." He nodded slowly, his tears falling. For the first time in years, he looked like my little boy again. When he left, I sat on the steps of my small home. The evening sun painted the world in gold. I listened to the laughter of the girls in the workshop, the rustle of wind through the flowers, and my heart felt full. I wasn't just a mother anymore. I was a woman who had learned that sometimes walking away isn't weakness, it's grace, and that even when the world forgets your worth, you can still remember it for yourself.